Hey friends, Ableton 12.2's new update puts some incredible new features at your fingertips. In this video, we're going to look at some conventional and unconventional ways to create some rad stuff. Let's check it out. Okay, so the first device I want to show you is called Expressive Chords, and in this case, I've made my own little chord bank. This device is going to blow people's minds. It's so cool. Essentially, the idea is that you can load up different chord banks, and within these chord banks, you can use them to create chord progressions. So in this case, if I play them in sequential order, it sounds like this. So right now I've got 8 chords in here, and so I'm going to play them in a different order and create my own chord progression out of this chord bank that I've made. Okay, so I've got an idea. I'll try to record it. Okay, so here's my new chord progression that I've made, right? Let's go ahead and open up Expressive Chords and take a look at what you can do. So the idea here is that you can record these chord progressions, and maybe you're not like the most talented keyboard player, but you can use Expressive Chords to make it sound like you are. Okay, so the first control is tilt, and so usually a keyboard player has a feel for the notes they want to emphasize. In this specific situation, it defaults to negative 20%, and so the idea here is that there's a little bit more velocity to the lower notes. So that sounds like this. But in this case, I'd like to have more velocity in the higher notes. Do you hear the difference there? And so another thing you can do is you can invert the chords. And so essentially what you're doing is you're taking the lowest note and putting it above the highest note, and so on and so forth. So check it out. Here's the difference between what this sounds like when it's inverted low versus high. And so what's so useful about this is that inverting a chord in different ways can make other elements of your mix work within the song instead of having a bunch of conflicting notes, right? Now, another thing you can do that's really interesting is strum. So, of course, you know what strum does. It plays notes in sequential order. But if we open up Expressive Chords, check this out. We can actually edit the articulation of these. So right now, this is the articulation going up. And so we can change this, though. We can make it so that they play in a perfect sequential order, depending upon our tempo. Right? Or we can change this articulation so we have 2 separate notes and then all 3 of these together. So what's so cool about this is that you can change this order yourself. So maybe I want to reorder this so I've got 1 note, then 2, then 2. Super interesting. So something else I want to show you is that, of course, you can modulate these using different modulation sources. One really interesting one is velocity. But what I really like about this system, I'm going to turn strum down a little bit, is that you can just randomize them. So if I randomize these at like 30%, I'll turn my articulation all the way down. Take a listen to how each chord is a little bit different. It's almost as if a human is playing this, right? So check this out. Let's go ahead and we'll add a lead. Maybe I'll drag this back a little bit. Let's go ahead and record my lead. Okay, here's my lead. Okay, so now you can hear this lead is sort of conflicting with my keys, right? They're kind of fighting for space. So, you know, one thing you could do is just, of course, turn the keyboard track down. And maybe that would work, and maybe I should turn my lead up a little bit. But something else that you can do that's so interesting about Expressive Chords is that I can simply choose to articulate this chord differently or invert it differently so that these 2 elements aren't conflicting with each other. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to invert this chord down a little bit, and I'm going to actually tilt the velocity so that it's lower. Now what this is going to allow the lead to do is to shine a little bit more so that I'm weighting the lower notes versus the higher notes. Now take a listen. Notice how the lead now sticks out because I have kind of shifted where the velocity is and where the volume of this chord progression actually exists, right? Expressive Chords is so awesome. So this next thing is really cool. Meld is scale aware, as you know, and right now we're working in the key of E major. They've added this new mode called Chord. So I can play So I can play all these different chords and they're going to be in scale. And what else I can do is kind of like blend the inversion. So let's just play a random chord here. And of course, you can also change the shape. So I think that's really cool, but what we could do is we could record this chord progression, but kind of use this smooth inversion thing to make a really interesting kind of like background pad or background chord for this idea that I have. All right, so I don't want to make you sit through me figuring that out, but here's the chord progression, and I'm going to mess with this inversion. Let's go ahead and record that. That's just too cool. All right, so I've got a little bit of automation here. Let's go ahead and look at the next thing I want to show you, and it's so exciting. Ableton finally updated their filters. And so we've got all these new filter modes. Check this out. Here is a comb filter inside of Ableton's auto filter. Check this out. So that sounds super great, but you also might notice that it sounds stereo, right? Well, what's so cool about using a comb filter is that you can create really interesting stereo effects here. Right now I'm using the LFO. Let's go ahead and turn the LFO all the way down. So you'll notice that it is not stereo, but if I turn the LFO up a little bit, you can hear that movement. One of the other reasons it's moving is because of the envelope. Let's go ahead and reset that real quick. So you can see that there's two different pages for that, but we're just looking at the LFO right now. The reason that there is stereo information is because I have offset the phase. Let's set that to 0. You'll notice that it's still in mono, even though it is moving through frequency. Let's go ahead and change this up though. Oh, I just love the way that sounds. Awesome. So then this next filter, check this out. They also have these other filter modes. One of them is called notch plus low pass, and this one is awesome. I absolutely love this filter shape. I'm glad that they've put a version of it into Ableton. This is one of my most common used filter shapes in other synthesizers as well. It just sounds so good. And so, of course, so I'll go ahead and reset the envelope and look at this LFO here. So, of course, if I set it off phase, we can just have it swirl all over your head. Let's leave that at a low setting. Okay, cool. So the next thing I want to show you is the envelope. And so one of the other things that they've added to this filter that I think is so interesting is the envelope sidechain. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this drum rack right here and drag it up. So I'm going to go ahead and record a rhythm here inside of this drum rack that I can use as a sidechain input. So here's my rhythm. That's it. So I'm going to just go ahead and maybe just duplicate this a bunch of times so I can use this in the background. Now, check this out. I can go back into Meld and I can use the input from this drum rack as my external, right? My external sidechain. So I'll put it into both of these filters, and let's go ahead and listen to the comb filter first. So I'm going to go ahead and solo this track, and I'm just going to go ahead and mute this track. I don't need it anymore. I just need the sidechain signal. Now check this out. Let's go ahead and do the same thing to this auto filter. So what I'm doing is I'm just feeding this drum rack signal into the auto filter so I can animate the frequency, okay? Let's go ahead and do that here. Awesome. Sounds so good. So let's go ahead and add a bass line to this. Okay, so I just copied these notes down here, and now I've got this bass line. Sounds like this. Let's go ahead and grab a new one of those auto filters, and I'll go ahead and use that notch plus low pass. Let's go ahead and add some resonance to it. And I'm going to show you something else. I'll grab a second auto filter, drag it here, and I want to show you this new mode called resampling. And so you can get some really interesting vowel sounds out of this by animating this filter. Let's go ahead and animate this filter yet again with that rhythm from the, what is it? Yeah, drum rack track 4. So check this out. All right, so I'm going to add a beat to this. All right, so this idea has taken somewhat of a turn. Here's this drum beat that I have. Let's go ahead and explore the new additions to Roar, which are, oh my God, I'm so excited about this. I'll put it maybe here in the chain. So you can see this new tab right here, and this new tab is getting added all over the place, and it's basically Ableton's new sidechain features. And so I remember being really excited about Roar's feedback modes, and something that you can do inside of Roar that's so interesting is now you can feed MIDI into the feedback mode. So let's choose maybe to add these notes from the bass line into the feedback system. Maybe we'll switch this to just the feedback mode. So I'll go ahead and choose the notes coming in from the bass line on track 5. And I'm going to switch this over to note. So now you see that it's not grayed out anymore, and now the feedback mode is going to be receiving notes from the bass line. Let's go ahead and just listen to this by itself. Now, of course, there's no feedback yet because I haven't turned a mount up yet. Let's take a listen. Now I need to activate this button. Now check this out. The feedback is now going to switch its notes depending upon the note that's coming in. Super awesome, right? I love it. So I've got kind of a bass line being made by the feedback path of the Roar device inside of this drum beat. Let's maybe switch this over to the half wave. That's so wicked. Now going on with that theme of using sidechain inputs, let's go ahead and use my, my rhythm from track 4 to trigger maybe the frequency to move up and down of this filter, because obviously that wide open sounds really unpleasant. Right? I want to animate that. So what I can do is go into my matrix, and I will say that the incoming envelope can now be applied to this filter frequency. Now, to point out a couple things, you can control the envelope over here using sidechain gain. So if you're not getting enough in there, you can crank this up. Normally, I would never be able to get that much range on my filter, but thanks to the gain, I can do that. I can also mix between the drums that are coming in and the sidechain signal. So check this out. Right? So that's really useful to use there. Now, I think that this is starting to sound pretty good, so I want to show you something else that I'm sure everyone is going to be so excited about. Check this out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to record the feedback path of this Roar by itself. Now, the way I'm going to do that is going to be awesome. Check this out. I'm going to select this area, right-click, and choose, yep. Now we've got bounce to new track or bounce in place. What I'd like to do is bounce to a new track because I want to use this as sort of like an element in my composition. So I'm going to click this. Now check this out. Now we have a printed version of the feedback, and then it went ahead and disabled the original. I'm going to re-enable the original, and then I'm going to turn the feedback all the way to 0. So now I've got a blend between these two. Super cool. So I'm going to go to the next one, and we're going to just choose different filter settings for this. Maybe we'll choose the notch filter and see what this sounds like. Okay, let's go ahead and bounce that. Now hopefully you can see how fast this is. You can just crank out edits, right? So now we have this one. Let's go ahead and explore the new filter mode called Dispersion. This thing is just wild. Take a listen to this. All right, let's go ahead and bounce that. Bounce to a new track. Go ahead and re-enable this. And now what I can do is I can kind of like blend through these and have different ones firing at different times, right? Maybe something like this. So now let's go ahead and send this back to 0, and we have this. Right, so you can see the creative applications of this are just insane. How awesome is that, right? So you can see my workflow here. I've just generated 3 different bounces of this crazy feedback path, and now I'm going to set this back to 0, and of course I'm just going to randomly choose different areas. Okay, so here's my crazy wacky edit, right? And that just took just a couple minutes. That is just so amazing to me. I love this new feature, and I'm sure everyone's going to get real excited about it. And of course, you can also bounce in place. You can right-click and choose bounce track in place, and what it'll do is it will freeze the arrangement and flatten it, all within one thing, right? So now you save yourself CPU and time and everything else. But I really like the fact that you can bounce it to a new track and then just re-enable the track so that you can just fire off a bunch of edits and create this crazy palette of edits that you can, mess with later, right? All right, so here's this crazy idea and like what it all sounds like when you put it all together. It's probably gonna be a hot mess. Cool, so of course there's a lot more that they've added with 12.2, but these were some of my favorite features and features that I felt like were really fun to explore and to create new ideas with. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this kind of thing, like, comment, subscribe. Much love, everybody. See you next time.